Om Punarapi Jananam Punarapi Maranam Punarapi Janani Jathare Shayanam Iha Samsare Bahudustare Kripaya Pare Pahi Murare Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Birth again, death again, and again, lying in the mother's womb. This vast ocean of transmigration is hard to cross. O Krishna, be gracious and release me from this endless cycle. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. So good morning, everyone. It's nice to be back, both from my travels and from my COVID, which I got during my travels. So our subject today is the quest for freedom. We all want to be free. This quest for freedom manifests very early in life, as small kids. The kids will refuse to do what the parents tell them to do. So from our very earliest childhood, we want to assert our own independence, our own freedom. And this goes on throughout our lives. We want to be free at every level. At the personal level, of course, we want to be free to do whatever we want. So what is the greatest punishment that you could inflict on a person after the death sentence, the capital punishment? After that comes the loss of freedom. We are all afraid of losing our freedom. So society, if somebody makes a mistake, how we punish them? By curtailing their freedom. So they go to jail, and now they cannot do whatever they want. They cannot move freely, they cannot eat what they want, they cannot dress as they want. They're helpless. There is no complaining. They have been punished, and they have to pay the price. And what is the price? Loss of freedom. So we take freedoms for granted. But when we lose it, we realize how precious our freedom is that we take for granted. There is another type of freedom at the social level. We call it freedom of speech, the freedom to dress as we want, marry who we want, and practice the religion we want. Again, here in the US, we take these things for granted. That yes, we are free to do all these things. But in other parts of the world, they don't have such freedoms, and people suffer. It is as if, say for instance, a dictator, he sucks up all the freedom from millions of people and concentrates in his own person all this freedom. So naturally he becomes tremendously powerful. He wields all this freedom that should be given to millions of people. They are all in his hands. But here is the land of the free. You're born free, so we take it for granted. It is my right to be free. Here the culture is such that it is my right. I am free. And that's wonderful. That's wonderful. But it's not the case everywhere in the world. We take it for granted. So from that social freedom comes my personal freedom. To choose the type of life I want to live, to follow my dream. All these things that we are familiar with in our culture here. But there is a flip side to it. All this freedom that we want and all this freedom that we get is within a certain framework. So there are certain rules we have to follow in order to be free. We say this is the land of the free. You can do whatever you want. Can you really? You have to follow the law. So within the law, yes, you're as free as you want. The moment you break the law, something happens, and we could lose our freedom just because we broke the law. So there is a certain framework within which we can say we are free. We are not absolutely free. We are partially free. One of our devotees told me something that happened to her a few years ago. She was in her late 80s. She was driving her car early morning through a quiet subdivision, and there was a stop sign. And she did a rolling stop. So she just slowed down and continued. There's nobody around. This is a quiet neighborhood. She's driving alone, but there was a cop lurking. And he stopped her. And she tried to plead with him. You know, she's almost 90, alone. So she tried to be sweet and explain and all that. And the officer was very friendly as well, but he gave her a ticket. And she was really, sad about it. But she understood. She said, I did a rolling stop. So the idea is there are certain rules. If you want to drive a car, we have to observe those rules. It doesn't matter if you are 18 years old or 100 years old. If you want the freedom to drive a car, you should abide by the rules that are within the law. So, yes, this is the land of the free, but this is the land of law as well. So there is a delicate balance between our freedom, of which we are very proud and very happy, and the law. Maybe in another country, the cop would have said, okay, but be careful next time. But this cop gave her a ticket. So there is more, the judicial system works more or less okay. If you break the law, you pay the price. At least if you are caught, definitely. So we see this delicate balance. We are free to some extent, but at the same time, we are not free. We are bound in so many ways. So you could say that your freedom ends where my freedom begins, and my freedom ends where yours begins. And if there is any overlap, then we have to decide what is the fair, how to deal with it. For instance, I give you an example, very trifling incident. So one of my jobs is to take out the trash. So we have 3 types of collection: trash, recycle, and yard waste. So whenever I go to collect the cart after collection, I open the lid to make sure they collected it and to make sure that nobody dropped the dog's bag at the bottom of it. And so what happens is there must be some neighbor who is a very good neighbor. He picks up after the dog, but then there's this beautiful cart outside, just so tempting. So he drops the bag there. So now he's free to walk. Hands are free. He's happy. He's completely free. But I'm not. I'm stuck with the bag. So you see, this is the problem. Now he's free. I'm not. Now it has become my problem. It was his problem. Now it has become my problem. I have nothing to do with the dog, but I'm stuck with the bag. So I had to pick it up and dispose of it. So that is a very insignificant example of how whatever we do has an effect on others, and whatever others do has an impact on us. And there is always this blurred line. So another day, what happened, I was going to do that, to check to bring in the rollout cart, and I see a guy with a dog and a bag approaching the cart. He's focused. He knows what he's going to do. And so from a distance, I say, hey, like, don't do that. I just motioned, like, hey. And he glared at me and said, have a nice day. Somehow I feel he didn't mean it. So I felt really bad. It looked like I am mean. And it turns out that it hadn't been collected. So it would have gone to the landfill. It would have been okay. But I don't know if the cart is empty. If it is empty, then for a whole week it will be stinking unless I take it out. So I felt very bad. But then what was the option? To let him do it. So you see, we are faced with these dilemmas. This is a very insignificant matter. But often there are big things, big dilemmas. We don't know what to do. So we are free to some extent, but other people are also free. Everybody has their own freedom they want to assert. And we have to live together somehow, in harmony. Swami Vivekananda says that everything in this universe shows this dual aspect of freedom and bondage. We feel we are free. We have this inner certainty, I am free. At the same time, we know we are not fully free. We know this body is going to die because everybody dies. We know that, it's a fact. And yet we feel that somehow, I don't know how, I will not die. And it's not rational even. It's not rational, but we have this dual feeling that, yes, my rational mind says, I'm going to die, but there is something inside me that says I'm not going to die. And in fact, most of us live our lives as if we are never going to die. So this idea of immortality is stronger than the idea of death. Because if we kept in mind our idea of death, we will live different lives. We will think long term. But we don't. We think about today and tomorrow and a few days further down the road, but not very far. Nobody wants to think about the final day. So Swamiji said, everything in this universe has this dual aspect of freedom and bondage. Even he gave an example. He said, look at the moon and the earth. The moon would be flying freely through space, but it got caught in the gravitational pull of the earth, and now it cannot get out. So it's trying to get out, and it's being pulled back. So it orbits the earth. And then the earth does that around the sun. The sun does that around the center of the galaxy, and on it goes. Everything is free to some extent and is being held back. And this is going on everywhere. So religion also speaks about freedom, but it's a different kind of freedom. We have been talking about freedom here and now, the freedom that we all want, the freedom to do whatever we want, to live the life that we want. That's all very good. But if we are talking about long term, as we said, that we know this body is going to die, what are we going to do about it? So religion says there is another type of freedom, which is absolute, is not relative, is not conditioned. We can be perfectly free. In some religions, this takes the form of heaven, like Christianity or Islam. So when we die, we go to heaven. But there are certain conditions. It is not open for everybody. You have to fulfill certain requirements in order to go to heaven. And what is this heaven? Swami Vivekananda said the heaven of such, religions is a better version of this world. So in this world, we have our friends and people who are not so friendly. We have our relatives, and maybe some relatives we don't get along with. So in heaven, we will be only with those relatives we like, not with my mother-in-law, to give you an example, or father-in-law. They will not be in heaven. I will be only with the people I love and the people who love me. And we will be there forever with God, and we'll be healthy and happy, and there will be nothing negative. So Swami Vivekananda says, this idea of heaven is, take all the good things of this world, minus all the negativity, and that is heaven. And Swami Vivekananda said that's a very primitive idea of heaven. Because in this world it's not possible. How could it be possible beyond? To have only happiness and no misery. This reminds me of the World Cup, the soccer World Cup that we had last month. Something remind me of that this world, we want good without bad, but we can never get it. Even God cannot grant it to us. God, with all his power, cannot give only happiness. Even God is helpless. And I give you a very simple example. Okay? So this soccer World Cup is a big affair, once in 4 years. Here in the US, people are not so bothered about it, but in other countries, it's a big deal. Okay? So every 4 years, it happens. It lasts 1 month. So just to qualify is a big deal. Only 32 teams qualify. Then they play for a month. And then, finally, there is the final day. Only 2 teams left. This is the final. Big deal. So what happened last month when we had the World Cup, it went to penalties. Okay? It was a draw, so it went to penalties. So they shoot their penalties. Then it comes down to the last penalty. Okay, everything is at stake. Just one shot. So the camera, first, the camera nowadays, they don't miss anything of the action. So first they show the player. They go like, it's so much tension you can feel. They're just breathing, focused. Okay. Then they show one group of supporters of one team. And you can see they're praying, like, please, 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 please. Let him score, let him score. I mean, I don't know if these guys believe in God, but they are praying so hard. I don't know who they're praying to. But you can see everybody's like, yeah. Then they go to the other team. They don't want the player to score. And they are doing exactly the same thing. Please, please, let him not score. Everybody's so focused, like, you can't believe it. The tension is such. And at that point I was thinking, even God, with all his power, cannot grant both prayers. He cannot. One will win and one will lose. And there is nothing God can do about it. So the moment they score a goal, one team will be, yeah, they just go crazy. And everybody goes crazy. But the other half of the stadium, they're like, they're crying, but not for joy. They're miserable. And it's instant. The moment the ball goes in, all this happens. All this is triggered. And I was thinking, this is the nature of the world. God, with all his power, cannot make both happy. If you want a game, you need losers. There's no way around it. If you want the world, you need suffering. And there is no way around it. So when we speak of goodness and helping the world, we are just shifting things around. Okay, a little goodness to this side, a little bad will go that way. You cannot help it. Swami Vivekananda said it's as if we cannot add any goodness or any bad. It is what it is. So that's a very small example. How God cannot interfere in the affairs of the world, even his own world. One will lose, one will win. So sometimes we win, sometimes we lose. Nobody will lose always, nobody will win always. If we can keep that in mind, we will accept things as they are. We try our best, like Sri Krishna says in the Gita. We try our best. Sometimes we will win, sometimes we will lose. The secret is to try our best. Not to be, elated when we win and dejected when we lose. Be detached and try your best. Knowing full well that sometimes it will go our way, sometimes it won't. Other religions, like Hinduism, Buddhism, they also speak about freedom, but their idea of freedom is a little different. It's not anthropomorphic. It is a transcendental state. They say, we come from consciousness. and we go back to pure consciousness. And in between, there is this state we are in. But we are still consciousness even now. Even now we are just Brahman. But for the time being, we believe we are in a material world. Swami Vivekananda said, if we can raise our minds to a higher level, we will not perceive the material world anymore. We will be in the same world, with the same beings around us, but our perception will change. And he gives an example of a scientist of his time. I don't remember the name, but he deliberately inhaled laughing gas. And as a result of that experiment, his mind rose to a different level, and he perceived the whole world as thought. He is thought, and everything else is thought, is made up of thought. How can you understand that? I don't know. But Swami Vivekananda validated that and said, that is a true state. We can raise our minds to a different level where we will not perceive matter. So this scientist perceived everything as made up of thought. And at a higher level, everything is blissful, everything is pure consciousness. There is not even thought at that level. So that is the freedom that some religions speak about, like Vedanta. Buddhism also, with nirvana, is a similar idea. We cease to be so-and-so, we cease to be a certain personality. We merge with the totality of existence, which is pure consciousness. So that is another concept of freedom. But then there is a problem. What are we to do in the meantime? We want to be free here in this world. We want to be free in the afterlife. We want to be free in an absolute way. That's all very good. We accept all that. But what are we to do in the meantime? Can we be free? Like just by an act of the will? You know, when Sri Ramakrishna was practicing Advaita Vedanta, Totapuri, his guru, told him, concentrate on your eyebrows and realize your true nature. You are Brahman. But Sri Ramakrishna could not. The image of the Divine Mother came before his eyes. And Totapuri was like mad at him. What? What is that? You cannot do that? You have to do it. So he pierced his eyebrows with a piece of glass, and Sri Ramakrishna went into samadhi. But Totapuri was amazed. How come he achieved this in just a couple of days? It took me 40 years to achieve this. So what I mean to say is, a great soul, an avatar, a prophet, they can, by an act of the will, become free, just like that. You know, the Guru told him, and he did it. But the Guru can tell us all the time, still we are like a stone. It just doesn't go through. So though we accept intellectually, though we believe and try to live these teachings, the fact is we are unable to just attain that state. Our minds are too distracted, too scattered to achieve that state. So what are we to do then in the meantime? Well, there is a more immediate thing that religions prescribe. The goal is to be free, but in the meantime be good. So that is something that religions tell. All religions will tell us do's and don'ts. Do this and don't do that. Be a good person, love your neighbor. It's pretty universal. Even atheists will admit that goodness is desirable. Goodness is constructive. Love is positive. So even if a person does not believe in any religion or any God, they will still agree that we have to try to be good people. We have to try to be good human beings. Swami Vivekananda said, be good and do good. That is the whole of religion. So that's the same idea. But when we follow religion in trying to be good, there are certain dangers. Two dangers you can mention. There are many more, but we'll mention two. One is fanaticism, and the other one is superficiality. So let us see what we mean by that. Recently I saw a video called "Your Goodness is Not Enough." So it's a short video. It shows a bunch of people, a group of people, they are trying to go to heaven. And there are two guards. And they say, okay, before you go in, we need to weigh you. We need to weigh your goodness. And if you're good enough, you can enter heaven. So the first guy goes up on the scale. He goes, boom, not good. So everybody, not good. So they ask questions, these guards, so were you a good person? Yeah, I think I was a good person. I made mistakes, but I'm a good person, I always try to tell the truth. I was a good son and a good parent. But in spite of all these people being good people, they are not good enough. So in the end, there is another guy, the last person in the group, doesn't seem to care much. He has a big file of red pages of all the misdeeds he has done. So they are going to weigh him, but then a bearded man with a t-shirt that says Jesus comes and says, no, I will step up for him. So when Jesus stepped on the scales, it goes, ping, good. So the guards say, okay, you can go in. So he goes to heaven with Jesus together, and they are smiling and being happy. And the other guys left behind, they go like, it's not fair, it's not fair. So it's a funny video, but the message, the moral of the story is, you are never good enough unless you accept Jesus. That is the message. No matter how good you are, you will never be good enough. So all these good people, they're doomed to go to hell. And this guy, just by virtue of believing in a certain avatar, he goes to heaven. So this is a kind of fanaticism, that no matter what you do, you will never be good enough. You have to think like I do. You have to accept my book, and nothing else will work. Only that. If you have that, you're good. Nothing matters. Just accept my way of thinking. Just accept my book. Just accept my teachings. So millions of people in this world, they think along these lines. So when we try to be good, following a religion, this is one of the dangers. To just think, okay, I have accepted some teaching. I have accepted some savior. I don't have to worry. And everybody else will be doomed. They say, if universal salvation is true, then Jesus did not need to die on the cross. He could have been a spiritual teacher, just teaching people to be good. Vedanta will say, we accept Christ as a savior. Just don't say he's the only one. He is an avatar. He is a savior. We agree with everything you say. Just don't say he's the only one. Don't condemn everybody else to be without Jesus. Why do you want to monopolize Jesus to yourself? Share Jesus with everybody. He came for everybody. So that is one of the dangers. The other one is being superficial. What do we mean by that? Some time ago, a professor came to the bookstore to buy some books. He's not a devotee, but he's friendly and interested in Vedanta. I'd never seen him before. So he asked me, can I ask you some questions? I said, sure. So the first question was, what is humility? So I said, humility is lack of desire. I just felt like answering that way, that if you don't have desires, you can be truly humble. So he said, okay, how do we become humble? That was the second question. So my answer was, look, in our tradition, we don't set out to achieve all these virtues piecemeal, one by one. Okay, do this to be humble, do this to be generous, do this to be truthful, etc., etc. I said, what we do is we do our spiritual practice. We struggle. We try to become spiritual. And as a byproduct of that, you will find you become humble. It's not that you are trying to be humble. In some other traditions, they may try to crush the ego, do this, do that, absolute obedience. Yeah, it's all very good. It's just not our tradition. We believe that all these things will happen naturally, spontaneously, when we do our spiritual practice. So just focus on your spiritual practice, and all these things will develop of themselves. If God is goodness, and we are trying to come close to God, we'll become good. If God is love, and I am coming closer to God, I'll become loving. You don't have to worry about, I have to love others, I have to love others. Love God, and you will begin to feel that you love others. So when we try to do our spiritual practice, we are trying to manifest our divinity. It is there in us. There is a spark of the divine in all of us. We have three choices. We can ignore it, like most people do. We can hide it through our misdeeds, like some people do. Or we can manifest it by our good deeds. It becomes more and more manifest. So this divinity is in all of us. As we do our spiritual practice, it manifests more and more. Then what happens next? We begin to see that the same divinity in us, it's in everybody else. Everybody has the same divinity. And then, a step further still, we begin to feel everything has that divinity. Not just human beings, everything, all beings, all things, everything is divine. Will not that make me humble? When I see divinity everywhere, naturally you will become humble. I don't have to flog myself, flog myself or punish myself. It is a very natural way to develop humility. Do you see God in others? Naturally we'll be humble when we see God in others. So I told him that, and he told me, but you are that already. Then I thought, that is the YouTube non-dual Advaita Vedanta. That you are that already. You don't have to worry. You are Brahman and everything else is Brahman. And I said, look, I understand where you come from, and I agree with you. We are all Brahman. We are all divine already. So his point was, why do you need to do anything? You are divine. So I told him, look, I agree with you. That is the teaching of Vedanta. We are all divine. Everything is divine. But let me ask you a question. You are meditating, repeating, I am Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. I am that transcendental, pure spirit, all-pervasive, immortal, impersonal. Okay? Suddenly, you have a very acute toothache, and it persists. Just tell me, what are you going to do next? Are you going to just sit there and repeat Aham Brahmasmi? Or are you going to call the dentist and try to get the earliest appointment available? So he didn't answer. He was like, speechless. Because really, that is our condition. We can go on talking about our divinity and the divinity of everyone. It is inspiring. It is good. It is even necessary to talk about it, to meditate on that. But we should remind ourselves that we are very far from that level. We are attached to a body and a mind, and we are limited by them all the time. So we are Brahman, but at the same time, we are limited in so many ways. So what I mean to say by superficiality is saying, oh, you don't have to worry. You are divine already. Why do you fret about these things? Like a spiritual practice. We need a spiritual practice because that divinity is hidden. Bring it out. There are cases where you can come to a level where you don't go to the dentist and you just ignore the pain. Ramana Maharshi, he was his mind was at such a high level all the time. He once was wandering in the mountain, and he disturbed a nest of wasps. accidentally, some of them, they make their nests at ground level. So he just happened to step on one nest. So all the wasps came out swarming and started stinging his leg. And he's looking at the leg and said, yeah, that's right. That leg disturbed you. I mean, we cannot do that. He could say, Aham Brahmasmi. When he had cancer, terminal cancer, the doctors say, if we amputate your arm, you will recover. He said, no, don't worry. He didn't amputate his arm. He must have known his time had come. For him, the body is nothing. For us, the body is everything. And we are saying, Aham Brahmasmi. It's ridiculous. So, it's good, but we should be aware where we stand. Aham Brahmasmi is very good, but don't take it so easy. It's much better to be a true devotee with true love for God. And in the background, yes, I know, I am Brahman. The time will come when God himself, the Divine Mother herself, will show me that state. I don't have to worry about that. To give you another example, there was a beggar, and some people did some DNA testing, and they found this guy is the king. He has royal blood in him. So they went to the beggar who was hungry and sick and living in the street and told him, look, this is the result of the tests we have run. You are the king. And the beggar is so happy. Oh, I'm the king. That's wonderful. But he continues to live in the street. He continues to be hungry. He continues to be sick and cold. What's the point of knowing he's the king? Even if it is true. Now suppose the same people said, okay, you're the king, come to the palace. And they feed him nicely, and they appoint a doctor to treat him and cure him. And then they sit him on the throne and say, now run the country, you are the king. Now you can say he's the king. What's the point of just knowing that I'm the king and continuing to be cold and hungry? So that is our condition. Somebody says, you are Brahman. And we believe, we truly believe that. Yes, I am Brahman. But we continue to be the same beggar. If we behave as such, then it's different. Sri Ramakrishna said, some people have heard about milk. They heard that there is a substance that is very nourishing, that is called milk. That is as much as they know. Some people have seen milk. They saw a cow and a guy milking the cow, and the milk comes out, is white, he gathers them in buckets, gathers it in buckets, etc. So they have seen the milk. They have a more certainty about it. Some people have drunk the milk and become nourished by it. What the difference between these three? So a realized soul, they have drunk the milk. They have become nourished. We have just heard about there is such a thing as milk. That's as far as our knowledge goes. That is Sri Ramakrishna's example. So when we avoid these two traps along the way, the trap of fanaticism and laziness, you can call it, this superficiality, then the question remains how to be good. We want to be free. And religion says, okay, to attain that freedom, you have to be good as possible. Then eventually, we'll become free. But the problem is, what is goodness? The parents should love their kids. And that is good. The kids need all the love they can get. But sometimes you have to discipline the kids. And it may look like something bad if you're disciplined, if you're punishing them. But they need to know certain limits. They cannot do whatever they want. So if you see a parent who needs to discipline their kids, you may say, oh, he's so cruel. Well, maybe on that day, at that particular point, that was the good thing to do for the sake of the kid. So this goodness is relative. If I ask all of you, what color is my shirt? You will say, well, it's pink or orange or something like that. If I brought a banana, but more specific, you will say it's yellow. The bananas are yellow. If I told you, is the banana red or blue? They will say, no, it's yellow. So there is universal understanding of what yellow means. But when it comes to goodness, I ask you, how is so-and-so? Somebody will say, oh, they're very good. And somebody will say, oh, they're no good at all. And we are talking about the same person. And one example that you will all understand is politics. Okay? Now, there are two parties. And the presidents, sometimes they belong to one party, sometimes they belong to the other party. No matter who is the president, which party they belong to, half of the population will love them, half will hate them. And it's the same person. It's the same person that half of the population, they cannot stand them, and half of the population, they're so happy with them. Isn't that strange? So when you talk about goodness and being good, this is the problem that we face. What is goodness? How to be good? Goodness can be many things. Again, religion can help us. The scriptures can help us to determine what is good. In the 3rd chapter of the Gita, Sri Krishna speaks about karma yoga and yajna. So I think from that teaching we can get some ideas about what is good for us. How can we attain that freedom that we all want? Arjuna starts by complaining to Sri Krishna. You are telling me that buddhi, or the right understanding, the right intellect, is superior to action, mere karma. And yet you want me to perform this action of killing my relatives in battle. So I am confused. So Arjuna says, I'm confused. I don't know what to do. What is the good course of action? It sounds like our condition. What is good? What are we supposed to do? Sri Krishna says, in the beginning of time, Prajapati, the creator, he created the world together with yajna, or sacrifice. That's a very deep statement. God created this whole world together with yajna, or sacrifice. What does that mean? So we'll see that later. Sri Krishna continues, Prajapati said, through this sacrifice, you will prosper, you will thrive. So worship the gods through this sacrifice, and the gods in turn will grant you whatever you desire, and thus both will prosper, you and the gods. And this comes from the beginning of time. So Sri Krishna says, people get bound, human beings become bound because they perform action outside yajna, outside offering. So what does yajna mean? Yajna means sacrifice. In the old days, they built special altars, and they lit a fire on the altar, and they offered certain, ghee or cereal, certain offerings to the gods with certain mantras, and that was called yajna, sacrifice. So Sri Krishna expands that idea and says, perform all your actions with in that same spirit. Whatever you do is a yajna. Whatever you do is an offering. Who are you offering to? Are you offering it to the gods? Well, yes and no, because these gods, they are called devatas. And the gods are nothing but manifestations of Ishvara, the one Godhead. So in Vedanta there is not conflict. Sometimes people are puzzled. You say that the ultimate reality is Brahman, pure consciousness, and you're bowing down to Kali and Krishna. It makes no sense. But for a Vedantin, there is no conflict. Yes, the ultimate reality is pure consciousness. It's impersonal. And yet, all these different deities, all these different devatas are aspects, are like parts of that universal Godhead. Just like a leg and a hand is a part of the body. It couldn't exist without the body. If you cut your hand, then it ceases to exist. It will die. But as part of the body, the hand is part and parcel of the body. And you don't call your hand your body. You call it your hand. So these devatas, they have their own form and their own name, but they're all part and parcel of that Ishvara, that transcendental God. So Sri Krishna says, just like when you worship these devatas, you are really worshipping Ishvara. When you do perform your actions for the sake of yajna, you are worshipping God in all these beings. So every living being becomes our own God, the object of our worship. So that is how to perform all actions as yajna. And he says, when we perform actions for our own sake, for our own selfish ends, we become bound. When we perform action for the sake of yajna, as an offering to the Godhead in all beings, we become free. So that is the trick. To do work for the sake of yajna, for the sake of God. Swami Vivekananda said, always take the position of a giver. Give whatever you can. You know, there are 3 types of people in this world. The lowest type, they always take, and they don't want to give. Give me, give me, give me. You know, some parents, they have kids that they're always asking for things. Give me, give me, give me, give me. That is a karma that they have to go through. So there is some type of person who always wants to take as much as they can and give as little as possible. That's okay, that's the lowest type. Then there is the next type is, I want to take, but I want to give. I don't want to take without giving. That is most of us. We understand that life is give and take. Sometimes I need from somebody, sometimes I can help somebody. And that is the vast majority of people fall under this category, that we give and we take. The highest type of person, they want to give as much as possible and take as little as possible. That is, as we evolve, we adopt this attitude. Swami Vivekananda said, adopt this attitude, be the giver. In any situation of life, always try to be the giver, not the taker. Anything, it applies to anything. Be the giver, not the taker. So they say that there are 5 types of yajna. Bhu yajna, that is the sacrifice we do for our other beings. In the old days, they used to keep some food outside the household, and some stray dog or some cow or some crow, some animal, even ants will come and eat. You are serving them. It's a sacrifice to all these lower type of beings. They all have the divine in them, just like we do. So you are serving them. It is as if we have a debt to them, and we are repaying our debts. That's another concept of yajna, that everything is interconnected. We cannot say that we are independent. Nobody can claim that. Without our parents, we wouldn't have been born. So no matter how much we may quarrel with them or how much conflict there may be in the family, the fact remains, without our parents, we wouldn't have been born. Without their parents, they wouldn't have been born. So there are so many things coming together to make it possible for a being to be born in this universe, in this world. So everything is interconnected. If our parents had not had food, they wouldn't have survived and they wouldn't have had children. Then we are born, then we stay alive how? By breathing the air, by eating the food. We are always taking so many things. We are breathing from the day we are born until we die. We are always taking air. We are always eating from the day we are born, we eat until the day we die. We are always taking food from the environment. So we are always taking and giving also. Everything is interconnected. So they say that we are born with certain debts. Just because we are born. I mean, it's not that we have tried to get into debt, but it's like, you want a human body? Okay. It's like, you want to study? Okay. You will have debt at the end of your, of your studies. Then you have to work to repay your college debt. So it's the same thing. You want to be born in this world? You have some debts that make it possible for you to be born. So this is to the lower beings. Then you have to the Manusya Yajna. That means our debts to other human beings. Somebody comes to your house asking for help, try to help them. Somebody has helped us in the past. Now it's our turn to help. It doesn't matter who is the recipient. We have been helped. Let us help now. Then you have Pitri Yajna, the debt to our ancestors. So they have little rituals that people perform to repay that debt. One of them is called Tarpan. They take water in the palm of the hand and they offer it with some mantra. And that it's a way of remembering your ancestors and praying for them. It doesn't look like a big thing, but when you're doing that daily, it has an impact. You're daily remembering your ancestors, you're daily praying for them. Then you have Deva Yajna, our debt to the gods. And we pay it by performing certain rituals. You know, I'm talking about the old days. This is the kind of traditional concept of yajna. So they perform certain rituals to propitiate the devatas, the gods. And finally, Brahma Yajna, the yajna to the ultimate Godhead, Brahman. How do we pay our debt to Brahman? They say by studying the Vedas, by reciting the Upanishads, or you can read the Bhagavad Gita. All these things, you are paying your debt to Brahman, to the ultimate reality. Sri Krishna says in the Gita, Yajnanam japa yajñosmi. Of all the yajnas, of all the sacrifices, I am the sacrifice of japa, repeating God's name. So when we say about sacrifice, yajna, it doesn't mean just action. It means also our way of thinking. We should have this way of thinking, praying for others, wishing everybody happiness and well-being. Sometimes we can do things that are very good, but our attitude is not right. It's like, I have to do it, So I do it. So we are spoiling it by our attitude. That it's not so much about what we do, but why we do. Why we do what we do. Is it just to impress somebody else, or just because I have to? Or is it because I do it as worship, as service, as an act of love? If it is done in that spirit, it will make us free, Sri Krishna says. So, let us recap what we saw today. We saw that we want to be free in every possible way. From our very earliest childhood, we rebel against, people telling us what to do and how to do it. Even the little child wants to be free and have their own way. Then we saw that in this world also, we yearn to have as much freedom as possible. At the personal level, at the social level, we want to be free in every way. Then we saw that society also, sorry, I lost the trend. We can be free at the social level also, okay? Just individual level and social level. Then we saw that religion offers freedom that is transcendental, that is unconditioned. That is the promise that religion has for us. You can call it heaven if you want. You can call it Brahman or Nirvana or Samadhi. But whatever you call it, don't say that only a few people will get there and everybody else is doomed. Vedanta says everybody will get there. It is our destiny. Even if we don't want to, we'll reach that because it's our destination. And we saw that there are two dangers when we try to practice religion, that is dogmatism and fanaticism and kind of an easygoing approach of superficiality. And then we saw that the way is through goodness. All religions say that try to be good as possible. But then again, what is goodness? We find that it's hard to define what goodness is. Something is good for me, it may not be good for you. So Sri Krishna gives us some idea. He says, whatever you do, just do it for the sake of God. Just do it for the sake of others. We are all interconnected. Don't be so eager to be free. See that everybody is free. If I am trying to make everybody free, then I have a better chance. If I want to be the first one to be free, then I'll be in trouble. Let everybody be free. I am working not just for my freedom. I am working for everybody's freedom. And the highest type of person, like Swami Vivekananda, they will say, I don't want freedom. I want everybody else to be free. Let me be the last one. A Buddha, a Vivekananda, they say that. I don't want freedom. Let me be born again and again and suffer thousands of miseries, so long as I can worship the only God I believe in, all these living beings. That is the God of Swami Vivekananda. So I think we have covered most of the ideas, so we'll stop here. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.